Bienvenido, Sushamdeed, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the CTS-131 Section 402 course for the spring 2021 semester. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's Switching, Routing, and Wireless Essentials version 7 course curriculum. And in this packet tracer tutorial and solution set video, we're going to be taking a look at one of the more challenging activities, and that is packet tracer 11.6.1, where we're going to be doing switch security configuration. And so we've gone from sort of a simple activity with 11.1.10, where a lot of the port security commands were provided for us, to this activity where we are going to be providing all of the commands from our experience here with module number 11. You can see we've got all kinds of VLAN information up here. We've got some objectives. We're going to create a secure trunk port. We're going to secure unused switch ports. We're going to implement port security. We're going to do some DHCP snooping, and we're going to configure RPVST Plus, or Rapid Per VLAN Spanning Tree, which is Cisco's implementation of the 802.1W standard RSTP, or Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. Remember, Cisco takes the standard, right, or took the standard and said, we don't want one instance of spanning tree for all VLANs. We want an individual instance of spanning tree for every single individual VLAN. And that's that Rapid Per VLAN Spanning Tree. And the plus sign, remember, we're doing 802.1Q. All right, well, let's dive in here and get going because we've got a lot of stuff to configure. So the instructions, we're going to create a secure trunk. So we're going to connect the Gig02 ports of the 2 access layer switches. And so that's going to be this switch to the left and the switch to the right. So switch 1 and switch 2 respectively. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's grab our connector with a straight through cable here, and we'll go to Gig02 and we'll plug that in, and you can see they gave us 1 percentage point for that. I'm going to go ahead and hit the fast forward buttons there, so hopefully we've got some spanning tree that's worked its way out here. And we've done that. So now we're going to configure those ports as static trunk ports on both switches. So you can see we've got switch 1 and switch 2 kind of queued up here and ready to go. We'll start over on the switch 1 side. We'll go from user exec with the enable command into privilege exec. From here into global config and then into interface gigabit Ethernet 02. Now remember, when it says that we're going to be configuring these ports as static trunk ports, that means we say switch port mode trunk. It means we're not going to allow DTP, or the dynamic trunking protocol, to negotiate to determine whether it's going to be an access port or a trunk port. Because by default, remember, if both sides are dynamic auto, it negotiates to an access port, right? Not a trunk port. And that's by design. Older Cisco switches used to default to dynamic desirable, meaning if you plug 2 switches together, it would auto-magically, DTP would configure it as a trunk link, and you don't want that to happen. That's a huge security concern. So it negotiates to access ports. All right, so we've got that set up. We're going to disable DTP negotiation. Well, that's switch port no negotiate. That turns DTP off. We're going to create VLAN 100. So I'm going to say VLAN 100, and we're going to give it the name of native. And we're going to do this on both switches. And again, we're going to swing back to switch 2 here. We're going to get switch 1 all done. Configure all trunk ports on both switches to use VLAN 100 as the native VLAN. So let's get back into interface gigabit Ethernet 02. And let's say switch port trunk native VLAN, 100. Right? And you can see we've picked up 9 percentage points for that. Now, we're going to be getting this PVID or block PVID local, blocking Ethernet Gig 02 on VLAN 100. And this is that per VLAN spanning tree. So it's blocking it because we've got inconsistent local VLANs. Because on this side, we've got native VLAN 100, and you can see we get this mismatch message here. And well, actually, we get it up here as well. You get this native VLAN mismatch. So one side has VLAN 100 configured, and that's switch 1, and the other side has switch 2 has VLAN 1 as the native VLAN. So let's work over to switch number 2 here, and let's do the same thing that we just did on switch 1, interface gigabit Ethernet 02. All right, switch port mode trunk, switch port no negotiate, and actually we'll pop out, we'll say VLAN 100, whoops, VLAN 100, name native, and then we're going to get back into gigabit Ethernet 02, and we're going to say switch port trunk native VLAN 100. Now that is going to clear the inconsistency up, right? So, and we should see messages, at least on switch 1, we should see some messages indicating that the inconsistency, port consistency has been restored, right? It says it's unblocking gig 02. Now, what's interesting here is, okay, that's a distribution layer switch. I just saw that and I thought maybe we were plugged into the wrong port, but we are not. So that's the distribution layer switch that we're going to be dealing with here shortly. All right, so let me go ahead. Let's save our config just in case. Let's say show interface trunk. Let's see what we've got going on here. And as you can see, out gigabit Ethernet 02, trunking is on. The mode on means it is a statically configured trunk port with switch port mode trunk. The encap is 802.1q because that is the only encapsulation that you can select for the trunk encap. And then the status is that it's trunking and the native VLAN is 100. So everything looks good for step number 1. Let's come down to step number 2. Shut down all unused switch ports on switch 1. Now they've listed them out there, but it's always good to say show IP interface brief. Let's see which ports. Well, 1 and 2 are being used, 10 is being used, and then 24, and then gigabit Ethernet 01 and 02. So that looks about right, at least from what I'm looking at here. So let's get into global config. Interface range is your friend here. Fast Ethernet 01 and 2, and so 01 to 2, oops, sorry, to 2. Fast Ethernet 010, Fast Ethernet 024, and then gigabit Ethernet 01 to 2. And whoops, sorry, I forgot my comma in there. Put a /, and there we go. And we're going to shut all those ports down. Oh, okay. So unfortunately, I put all the ports in there that are being used. And what I want to do is put the ports in there that are not being used. So let's try this one more time. How about interface range? Fast Ethernet 03, and it's going to be to 09. 10 is being used, Fast Ethernet 011 to 23, and that's actually it. Gig 01 and 02 are both being used, and so let's shut those ports down instead. Much better approach there. I apologize. I was so wrapped around the axle, and we're doing the fast forward button there to bring up those ports. All right, so everything looks good there. We're going to, on switch 1, we're going to create VLAN 999. We're going to name it black hole. Now, the reason that we would do this, we're going to say VLAN 999, name black hole. And sometimes, well, I shouldn't say sometimes, I always use the name parking lot, right? Because what we're going to do, it says the configured name must match the requirement exactly. Now, we're going to move all of those unused ports into the black hole VLAN. And the reason we're doing this is we're moving all unused ports that are already shut down, and we're going to dump them into this VLAN so that they're not in VLAN 1 and they're not in any other VLAN that's being used. We want to get them out of that default VLAN 1. So we're going to find that interface range command again, and that's our command right there. And we're going to say switch port access VLAN 999. And you see we actually picked up 30 points for that. Now, let me check something. I'm curious if switch port mode access, if they want that command on there or not. Again, those ports, if something was plugged in and you didn't have the switch port mode access, as long as it's not a switch, if it's a PC or a laptop, whatever the case may be, it would be an access port. I'm going to leave that command on there to make it an access port to ensure that they are not trunk ports. Okay, and that takes care of switch number 1. I'm just reading here to make sure that we're good. Now we're going to activate port security on all the active access ports on switch 1. So that command that I mistakenly ran, where's it at? And did we not get that? 0 to 3. So I'm going to have to run that command again. All right, so this is the command where I want to say interface range fast Ethernet 0.1 to 2, comma, fast Ethernet 0.10, comma, fast Ethernet 0.24. So those are all the access or PC ports that we have configured on switch 1. And so now I'm in all of those ports at the same time right here. So the commands I enter in are going to apply to all of these ports. So we're going to configure the active ports to allow a maximum of 4 addresses. Now, here's what I think is interesting. It says activate port security, right? So remember, you have to say switchport port security and hit enter. That command by itself is what activates port security. If you typed in all the other port security commands and did not type that command in, port security is not going to come up. It simply isn't going to work. All right, so we've got switchport, port security, switchport, port security, maximum of 4 MAC addresses to be learned on the ports. Now it says for ports fast Ethernet 0.1 on switch 1, statically configure the MAC address for the PC, and then configure each access port to automatically add the MAC address to learn. All right, so it's asking for fast Ethernet 0.1, so interface fast Ethernet 0.1. We want to say here switch port, port security, MAC address, and we want to enter the MAC address in. So let's grab and let's make sure that's fast Ethernet 0.1 there. It lights up. Okay, good. So just checking to make sure we've got the right ipconfig-all, or I can probably get away with, yeah, we need the all. All right, so here is my MAC address, right? And that's going to be the value that we enter in here. And you can see that it wants it in the same format that we're viewing it. Now, take a look at what happened here. I don't have logging synchronous on. So now we're going to have to do the following. The first thing I'm going to do is, let's say, line con 0. Let's get logging synchronous on, so that when we get those log messages coming to the screen, we still get the prompt back. So switchport, port security, MAC address. Now we want to enter the MAC address in. So 0010.11 echo 8.3 Charlie Baker Baker, 3 Charlie Baker Baker. And let's see if we pick some points up for that. And we do. So that is how you statically hard code the MAC address in, meaning we're not learning the MAC address auto-magically and then sticking it to a specific port or gluing it to a port. So that was the active ports to allow a maximum. We did that. So for ports, fast Ethernet 0.1 on switch 1, we statically configured things. We just did that. And now we're going to configure each active access port to automatically add the MAC address learned to the ports, to the running configuration. And to do that, this is for the other ports. So interface range, fast Ethernet 0.2, comma, fast Ethernet 0.10, comma, fast Ethernet 0.24. And we're going to say switch port, port security, MAC address, sticky. And now we're at 80%. So configure the port security violation mode to drop packets from the MAC address that exceeded the maximum, generate the syslog entry, but don't disable the port. And what they're saying there, the key is generate the syslog entry. That is restrict, right? And then but not disable the port means we're not going to leave it in the default mode of shutdown, and we're not going to use protect. We're going to use restrict. But we got to be careful here, right? We're in 3 of the 4 ports. We want to go into interface range fast Ethernet 0.1 to 2, comma, fast Ethernet 0.10, comma, fast Ethernet 0.24. Oops, I forgot the comma again there. I got the wrong. And this is going to be switch port, port security, and violation. And remember, it's not shutdown, it's restrict. And then we're going to pick up some points for that. So now here we are down on step number 4, configure DHCP snooping. Now, note, the DHCP snooping configuration may not score properly in Packet Tracer. And that's okay, even if it doesn't do that. And so here's what we'll do. We're going to leave this to the end. Let's get the BPD guard and the port fast done so that we've got that done. So on all the access ports, so let's go ahead and pop in here. We're going to say enable port fast, right? So spanning tree port fast. And that's it, right? And there we go. So port fast has been turned on onto the ports for the PCs. Enable BPDU guard. So spanning tree, BPDU guard, enable. And this is how we do it on a per port basis. And then configure switch 2 so that all access ports will use, and this is interesting, it didn't ask us to configure the implementing port security. We didn't do anything on switch 2, but it wants us to do that on switch 2, the BPDU guard anyway. So let's knock that out. Let's get into global config. And again, so interface range, fast Ethernet 01 to 2, 01 to 2, comma, fast Ethernet 010, comma, fast Ethernet 024. And so it wants all of the access ports to use port fast by default. So now I'm curious here if they're wanting us to do it this way, spanning tree port fast. Okay, so that is no spanning tree port fast. I don't think that was what they were looking for. So when it says configure switch 2 so that all access ports will use port fast by default. And that's funny because I thought we got the points for that. Because what I could say is I could come out here and say spanning tree port fast default. And that is not, and so there's some semantics here. Enable port fast on all access ports that are in use. So we enabled it on all access ports in use by going under the port configuration, saying spanning tree port fast. C says configure switch 2 so that all access ports use port fast by default. So that's where we run it from global config mode. And let's see, I think we're going to get a little more love here on the completion percentage. Well, we get a percentage point. We got 1%, but we got the percent. And that's what they were looking for there. So the wording there is a little tricky. And that's the difference between what we did on switch 1 by saying, where did we do that? Right up here, spanning tree port fast, and what we did on switch 2, which was, and we did that on switch 1 under the interface config. On switch 2, we did it under global config. And there's two different ways that you can do it, and we just saw both of those. So that's it for the port fast and the BPD guard. So we've got 7 percentage points hanging out there. So configure the trunk ports on switch 1 as trusted ports. So we're going to come over here and configure the trunk port. So we have do show interface trunk. We've got 2. And I think what's interesting here is we keep getting these messages, these log messages. We can't get onto the multi-layer switch, but the messages that we're seeing is the multi-layer switch is using VLAN 100. Let me go back and take a look. Okay, configure all trunk ports, right? So we need to do the following. Interface, gigabit Ethernet 01, switch port, trunk, native, VLAN 100. And again, I missed that initially, and that cost us a couple points there, so we're going to get some points for that. So all trunk ports, interface, gigabit Ethernet 01, and we're going to say switch port, trunk, native, VLAN 100. All right, so we are at 95%, and we did not get a point. We didn't get any points for that on this side, but it's going to take care of these native VLAN mismatch messages that we've been seeing. All right, so we are now down to DHCP snooping. And it says it's not going to give us the points. I'm curious to see what it is grading if it's not. And interesting here, fast Ethernet sticky. So that's interesting. Switch 1, fast Ethernet 01. It was looking for sticky to be enabled. That's kind of interesting. And okay, so it wants the trunk ports to be configured as well. So, okay, so this is interesting because my reading of what it wanted done on fast Ethernet 01 on switch 1, and let's take a look here. 4 ports, fast Ethernet, statically configure the MAC address of the PC using port security, which we did. But is it looking also, let's check that out. Fast Ethernet 01, so I'm sorry, fast Ethernet 01, switch port security MAC address sticky. So we actually got points for that. And that's interesting because it asked initially for it to be hard-coded. And then the other thing it looks like we missed that it was looking for was on Gigabit Ethernet 01. Whoops, sorry, Gigabit Ethernet 01 to say switch port mode trunk and switch port no negotiate. Switch port trunk native VLAN 100, which I thought we had already entered in here. Do show interface trunk, and let's see what we're dealing with. And why is fast Ethernet 01? Did I get into the wrong port? So hold on one second here. So fast Ethernet 02, something must have happened here at some point. 01 to 2. So interface range, fast Ethernet 01 to 2. So switch port mode access. So those are access ports. And then switch port, and I'm not sure what VLAN those are supposed to be in. VLAN 10. Switch port access VLAN 10 for fast Ethernet 01 and 02. So that takes care of that. I'm curious if I screwed up something here by mistake. So gig 01 on switch 1. That's switch 1, correct? Yeah, that is switch 1. So the no negotiate and the port mode, I thought we had those turned on. Let's go down and take a look here. Do show run. And let's take a look at gig 0. Whoops, sorry. All right. Gigs. Oh, did I do 02 by default? I could have sworn I did Gigabit Ethernet 01. Switch port no negotiate. Oh, sorry. Switch port mode trunk and switch port no negotiate. All right, so now we're at 100%. So I thought this is extremely interesting. I could have sworn that I entered those commands in properly, and it doesn't like it, or it didn't like whatever I did. And again, probably user error on my part. So we're at 100%, but we've still got some work to do here. So the DHCP snooping, configure the trunk ports on switch 1 as trusted ports. So again, all of step 4, excuse me, hold on one second here. All right, sorry about that. I had to get a quick drink of water. So all of step 4 is basically ungraded. So let's configure DHCP snooping here. So the first thing that we need to do is from global config, we need to enable it, right? Because it's not on by default. So we're going to say IP DHCP snooping. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is configure the trunk ports as trusted ports, limit the untrusted ports on switch 1 to 5 DHCP packets. And we're going to have to get into the interface for that. And then let me see here on switch 2, enable DHCP snooping globally for the VLANs. And so on switch 1, I'm trying to figure out here if they're asking for configure the trunk ports on switch 1 as trusted ports. Limit the untrusted ports to 5 packets per second. That's easy enough to do. And on switch 2, enable it globally for VLANs 10, 20, and 99. Well, that's the IP DHCP snooping VLAN command, and I'm wondering if they want that command run on switch 1 or not. Well, let me do that. We'll just say IP DHCP snooping VLAN, and again, you're going to put a range of VLANs in here. So we're going to say 10, 20, comma 99. Right, so we'll do that. And then we're going to limit the untrusted ports on switch 1. And actually, the untrusted ports, those are going to be, God, we're going to interface range this again. So interface, well, okay, it's not graded. I'm going to go ahead and do it like this. So it's not graded. And we've got a lot of ports that are shut down. So I'm simply going to do interface range, fast Ethernet 01 to 2, fast Ethernet 010, and then fast Ethernet 024. So we're going to do it on the ports that are actually DHCP snooping, limit, and then the rate. And the limiting rate is going to be 5 DHCP packets per second. And that should be good. Oh, I'm sorry, I almost forgot. The trusted port. So interface gigabit Ethernet 01. Let me make sure I get the 01 to 2. configure the trunk ports, interface range, gigabit Ethernet 0, 1 to 2. And that's probably the mistake I was making, was I was saying fast Ethernet 1 and 2 instead of gig 1 and 2. And so here we're going to say IP DHCP snooping, trust. So those are trusted ports, right? All right, so over to switch number 2 to kind of wrap this up, and we've got to sort this out here. Interface, gigabit Ethernet 0, 1 to 2. Keep forgetting the range command here. There we go. So switch port mode, trunk, switch port, no negotiate, switch port, trunk, native, VLAN 100. I want to make sure that that's standardized there. And on switch number 2, we're going to enable DHCP snooping globally. And I guess let's just do the same thing here. We'll just go say IP DHCP snooping. We'll get it turned on. We'll say IP DHCP snooping VLAN 10 29. Oops, sorry, 99. And then we're going to get an interface gigabit Ethernet 0 interface range gigabit Ethernet 0, 1, and 2, where we're going to go ahead and say IP DHCP snooping trust. It's going to trust those ports. And then the untrusted ports, interface range fast Ethernet 0, 1 to 2, comma, fast Ethernet 0, 10, comma, fast Ethernet 0, 24, IP DHCP snooping limit rate, and we said 5. All right, so now from here, what you could say is you could say show IP DHCP snooping, and you can see it shows the ports that are trusted, that are untrusted, the rate limiting that's going on. And let's get that in gigabit 0, 1, and 2. And those are trusted, meaning they're allowing those DHCP packets to float back and forth. All right, well, that is going to do it for Packet Tracer Activity 11.6.1, where we took a look at switch security configuration work. And we actually did quite a bit there. And again, I apologize for shutting the interfaces that were being used and not the ones that weren't being used initially. All right, well, that does it for this activity. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you got any questions, and I hope to see you in the next video.